I'd like to briefly introduce our panel of speakers this morning. Our topic today will be the title of one of Swamiji's books, Hope for a Better World, in which he speaks about the need for communities and, in his own words, takes on many of the big guns of Western philosophy. It's a fascinating topic, and we'll approach it from several different angles. Our other speakers are Nitai Deranja, who is the founder of the Ananda school system. Back in, I believe, 1972, he founded the Ananda school, and if memory serves, it was in a chicken coop down at the market area. Starting from these humble beginnings, he has helped inspire a movement of education, and also, I think, was directly helpful in inspiring Swamiji to write the book Education for Life in 1986, a book which has now been republished in India just this year and has a whole new section at the back based on all the real-life experiences in our school for nearly 40 years now, 35 years, 36 years. The school has been in existence. This system is based on the principles and teachings of Yogananda, who himself founded a school in India before coming to America and intended to found one here in America as well. So this is a very highly esteemed ideal of Yoganandaji's, and it has taken manifestation here through the instrumentality of Nitai and many others. So he'll speak on education as part of Hope for a Better World.
It's a interesting world we're all part of. Mr. Kartikeyan was talking about global warming and the religious disputes on the planet, and I was going back in my mind when I was growing up. It was a time nobody talked about global warming. Religious disputes were kind of in the background, but there was a few things to keep us occupied. There was a Cold War going on. We were building bomb shelters. There was a war going on in Vietnam. I happened to be at Berkeley, going to school in Berkeley right in the middle of it, so I majored in political activism. I got to be a little bit a part of the civil rights movement, just a kind of a tiny way for a year. And those were the issues of the late 60s, early 70s. And working through them didn't get me far in terms of political activism, but it did get me far in terms of realizing that that wasn't going to be the answer for me. There was something else that needed to work, and it was on a deeper level. And that's what got me here. That's what got me here to Ananda. I don't think I understood it clearly, maybe as clearly as Mr. Kartikeyan said it, but I just knew something was missing. And at this point, I'd say it was that change of consciousness was the answer to those problems of the 60s. It's the answer to the problems we're facing now in this millennia. It'll be the answer to the problems 100 years from now, 200 years from now. And what Swami has been the vanguard here for us is to give us a tool for actually making that a way of making change on the planet, of starting to change consciousness. I teach history in one of my things in the high school, so I pay attention to some things that most people don't. I was looking up research, which is interesting. It was a poll that, I don't know if it's Gallup or one of those companies has been taking for the last 54 years. And they have records of the answers since 1954. And the question was, what do you think of interracial marriage? And when the poll started, 94% of the people thought it was a bad idea. It was, or worse. And you could and you track the change through the decades, and the last time they asked it in 2007, it was almost reversed. It was like 90% of the people now think that it's fine. Interracial marriage, it shouldn't be a problem. You see consciousness is changing on the planet. It's changing in the point that Mr. Kartikeyan brought up about acceptance, that there's more than one way to go to God. Another group, PEW is their nickname. They did a very extensive research on the area of religious beliefs in the United States. They interviewed like 35,000 people from around the country, all different religions. And they showed there, too, reflecting back on earlier studies, that this whole idea of that there's more than one way has gained enormously in the last 10 years. That even among groups, like I was raised a Catholic, in 1955, going back a long ways, I remember going to visit my aunt in Wyoming with my mother. My aunt, my mom raised me as a Catholic. We were Catholic. My aunt was not, and she was married to a preacher. I think it was a Lutheran preacher. And I said, well, let's go to his church and see what he's like. And my mom says, oh, we can't do that. That's a sin. And it was a sin in those days. That was one of the things that you got to go to at least purgatory for, maybe not hell, but. And even the Catholics now, the majority of Catholics believe that there's more than one way to get to God. And in fact, most groups, there was just a couple of groups that still clung the other way. I think the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and maybe one other group. And the majority of the people in that faith felt that their way was the only way and everybody else wasn't going to get there. But it's huge, huge change in a very short period of time. When we think about 50 years, is not that long, on this planet. And so you can see that this new age is coming in. Dwapara is coming in. It is going to change consciousness. It's going to change how things happen. We're fighting the battle of the old style, the Kali Yuga, trying to hang on to those materialistic ideas. Well, I'm supposed to talk about education up here, and one of the places that comes in is in education, because we have an educational system that comes out of Kali Yuga. It's, you track the roots of it, you go back hundreds of years, but it's become more and more the sense that what's important is matter. What's important is facts. What's important is test scores. And not only in the United States, I used to think the United States education system was really backward, but the more I find out about other education systems in other places like Japan and India and other places, I think, no, we're all in it together. Everybody's stuck in Kali Yuga for some reason, and I'm not sure why education is such a magnet for that, but it's just, the latest thing in California was real interesting. Governor Schwarzenegger issued an edict or I guess he can do that. He said, every 8th grader in California should be taking Algebra 1, or will be taking Algebra 1, as an 8th grader. I teach math in high school. I can guarantee you there's a big portion of people in school right now that are not going to be able to pass Algebra 1 in high school. It's going to take them, maybe they could pass it when they're sophomores, maybe they could pass it with 2 years. There's certainly a lot of kids that can do it in 8th grade, and great. Haribo, we can have them doing calculus and they're sophomores. But but to try to do it by edict, to try to force those kids who are incapable of doing it, what's it going to do? What's it going to do to the system? What's it going to do to those kids? It's going to make them feel like failures, like they're stupid. They can't do what they're supposed to do. So there's a lot to be done in education. I did have the incredible blessing of arriving at Ananda when the need for a teacher was at its height, at zenith. It was such a welcome reception. One of the activities of the children in the community at that time, there was no organized system for them. It was hiding in the garden and throwing cabbages at the adults as they walked by. So we had the chance to develop the schools here. And Dharmadas said that I was, I forget how you put it, I had something to do with Swami writing his book on education for life. And the way that it worked out was that Swami was going on a trip to India, I think, at that point. And we had talked, and I was telling him, the schools have been going about 12 years at that point. I said, we really need to write something about explaining what we're doing. And so he says, okay, go ahead, do it. So he was gone about 6 months, and I about killed myself in those 6 months. It was one of the most interesting things I've ever been through. I could not get my mind to work in a way that would get that book out. I would find myself just writing in a big circle, and just like over and over and over again. And he came back and he said, well, how's the book? And I said, well, it didn't happen, and I couldn't do it. and he just kind of went inside, and he said, "Okay." And that was when he took it, and then the book came out, and thank God he wrote it instead of me. So it's an amazing book because it's truly revolutionary. It truly takes these principles of Sanatana Dharma and puts them in a format where we can share them with children. What are some of those principles? I mean, there are basic, parts of truth, universal truth, Sanatana Dharma, that it's so helpful to know in dealing with this lifetime, this incarnation. For example, happiness is inside. You find happiness inside. It's not something you find in material things. Things like the whole idea that energy, high energy, produces joy, produces a sense of expansion and satisfaction in life. The idea that human love only can find its fulfillment when it transmutes into divine love. Those are just a couple key ones. So how are our children brought up in our society with those three principles? We don't do a good job. We have this whole consumer society built on convincing you, and with billions of dollars of energy behind it, that your happiness lies in whatever brand X is, or the newest form of electronic gadgetry, or whatever it takes. We find a whole movie industry and music industry founded on the fact that human love by itself can be completely fulfilling and can give you everything you ever wanted. We have a business world that, this is one of my own experiences that got me on the path. This is big. Maybe it's not every business. It can't be every business. But I ended up working for the railroad for a summer back when I was about 18 years old. And the railroads, for those who haven't studied that part of history, they're the place where the trade unions had the greatest victories and really basically getting to the point where they almost control the companies. But the problem was that in the process, what happened is I went in there and I realized the whole purpose was to get paid the most for the least amount of energy. That was the basic premise. And I went in there, this young kid, 18 years old, well, what do we do today? And they say, cool it, kid. Don't show us up. And if we have 3 hours worth of work, and we want to make sure it lasts 8 hours. So slow down, take it easy. If you get done early, just do it over. So those are the kind of things that, what happens if you're trained in those areas? What kind of a life do you end up? Well, you end up with a pretty sad life. You end up with a very stagnant life. So what about an educational system that tries to help children understand deeper ideas of life, how life works, different principles? Well, how do you do that? I remember going to ask Swami that. School started in, 72, probably Christmas of 72. I was over there saying, how do you do this? What is it all about? And I remember at one point saying, maybe I should take a year and go study. Maybe I can go study Montessori or Rudolf Steiner and find out. Maybe I can go to Ranchi and study master's school. He looked at me and said, there's nothing to learn in Ranchi. Then he said, you have to get it from inside. You have to get it from inside. You have to get it vibrationally, intuitively, through attunement, as Jyotish was talking about yesterday. And, one of the things you've realized, the big trap is most people do, they say, well, here's some truths, let's learn them. So everybody raise your hand and say, happiness does not abide in things. Let's memorize that, in fact. Where does happiness lies? Okay, so you create a catechism of questions and answers around these basic principles, and you indoctrinate your kids in them, and they get to 12th grade and they can pass the tests. They get a good score on the religion part of the test. I used to get A's in religion in Catholic school. It meant absolutely nothing to me. I mean, it had no contact with me at all, but I was really good at memorizing those answers. So that's not the way. The way has to be different. It has to be through experience. It has to be through realizing it for yourself. So I'm going to do a couple of things this morning to try to share with you how the school works. So if you would all stand up, please. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to wave your arms around, but just standing straight up. Inhale and tense. And relax. Okay, that probably felt pretty good. Now I want you to double the amount of energy you put into it. Okay? So you're going to do it twice as hard as you just did it. Ready? Inhale. Tense. And relax. Okay, that might feel a little better. Okay, let's try again. Let's go up. See if we can go up another doubling. Okay? All right, ready? You're really going to have to rip the tendons off your muscles in this heart. Okay, inhale. Tense. And relax. Okay, you can sit down. I won't push it any further. So, you work with children that way. You just help them to see that energy is limitless, and energy is tied to willpower, and that they can learn how to bring that energy into their body and use it, and make it happen. My daughter was in 5th grade here. The teacher did this same exercise with them. And my daughter has become a young woman of intense willpower. And I think maybe it traces back to experiences like this. But the teacher said, okay, inhale and tense. And she tensed so hard she passed out. But she got the message. She got the message that she could actually up the energy level. I'm going to try to play this game. I've never played it with a group like this. This is called Fortunately, Unfortunately. It's a little children's game that we do. So I'm going to start with a little story. I'm going to say a line. I'm going to say, it's such a beautiful day, and we're gathered here in this amphitheater, and it's just a gorgeous occasion. Then I'm going to ask somebody to raise their hand and tell me something negative, unfortunately, that's about today. So I'll say, fortunately, today's a wonderful day. We're here in this amphitheater to share satsang together. Okay, who is willing to try an unfortunately?
Unfortunately, there are a lot of flies.
Okay. Okay, who's willing to read off of what he just said and say a fortunate? Yes. Fortunately, we have many geese. Okay, unfortunate. Who has an unfortunate? Anybody over here? Yes. Unfortunately, the geese aren't here today. Okay, so you get the idea. We could do this kind of going on and on. With kids, you can make it a lot of fun. First time I did this with kids, I thought it was just kind of a fun little game to play, try out. You're always experimenting with these things because there's no blueprint, at least no physical blueprint. And so we had, of the group I was working with, it was junior high level, and I'd had a really hard time with them because they would get themselves all psyched up for something, and then if it didn't happen exactly the way they wanted it, they would get all upset, all emotionally upset. We played this game. All we did was play this game for 10 minutes or something like that. It just so happened we had a field trip planned for the end of that week on a Friday. We probably played this game on Tuesday. And the field trip, they were all excited about the field trip. We got to Friday, and the last minute, I got in the door expecting to go on the field trip and found out the transportation had fallen through. And now I got to confront my class. And I said, guess what? We can't go on the field trip. And I looked at them. They paused, and they says, that's okay. We can find another way. They continued the game. They just kind of said, okay, it had made an impression on them. And those kinds of things, think about if you had that lesson of even-mindedness, at 10 years old or 12 years old, where you weren't, emotionally in this roller coaster ride all the time, or at least you knew that being on the roller coaster was not a necessity of life, that there were other options, you'd be really far ahead. And that's what Education for Life is all about. It's basically the whole idea that you can have a head start on this process of soul evolution in a lifetime. Because without these these are universal principles, and they don't just happen in an EFL school. They happen in any school where there's a teacher who's got some wisdom to share. But if you can think of your own life. Think of your own life. Imagine yourself, what you've learned in the last 10 years, and think about it if you'd learned that back when you were 12 years old. How would your life be different? Probably significantly. You might have saved yourself a whole lot of pain, and you might have been able to learn much more rapidly and grow much more rapidly. So that's what these schools can do. That's what this approach to education can do. It can provide a launching pad for a whole generation of people. The problems Mr. Kartikeyan described are significant problems. I mean, those are huge things to work with. What kind of people are going to be able to stay positive and solution-oriented in the face of that? And yes, it's a challenge. But, of course, we know the teachings. There are no such things as obstacles. There are only opportunities. And but it's going to take people who have the strength to be able to confront that and not get shaky in the knees or just start to give up, hopeless, and just say, oh, forget it, there's nothing we can do. You need people strong. You need people strong who can stand up there and look it in the face and say, no, I know there's an answer. I know there's a solution, and I'm going to be part of it. I'm going to find my way to be part of it. That's the other part of doing these schools, is that you have no idea what's going to happen to the graduates specifically. Generally, you know they're going to come out dynamic, courageous people. But where they end up and what part of the world they decide to apply their energy to is you have to leave it up to them. It's not a parochial school. It's not meant to train a future generation of Ananda members and then judge our success and how many children stay here, because souls don't work that way. So each soul has its own individual dharma. And this type of education, the idea is to free that soul, empower that soul to whatever they do, to do it as brilliantly and as magnetically as possible, and to bring in, and to learn their lessons tremendously. Hopefully, there will be a certain percentage of young people who decide to stay here at the village. Hopefully, there'll be others who decide to go off and start their own communities and extensions of Ananda, but there'll be others who find their dharma in other parts of life, and that's completely fine. That's completely in line with EFL teachings. It's not trying to narrow people, it's trying to expand them and empower them. So I wanted to just close briefly with, there are, let's see, I'm just about out of time. So I brought a little outline of things that Master Swami calls them tools of maturity. I mean, almost I might call them tools of liberation. And a little checklist that we use with the students of just all trying to give this child a balanced, broad perspective on life, developing the body, developing the feelings, developing the will, developing the intellect, and then in specific ways. And I'm going to leave these out here afterwards, anybody's interested. I also wanted to just let people know that the most recent part, well, there's two most recent parts. One part is we're trying to start an outreach program for Education for Life. It's been pretty much in its, what's the word, nursery stage, being kind of nurtured in the Ananda environment. Usha Dermond, who's the founder of the Portland School, is stepping forward to head an outreach program to be able to share these things outside of the Ananda circle, to be able to find other groups, other people throughout the United States, throughout the world, to develop these ideas in their own particular ways. And so that's it's an exciting next step for us as a movement. With the taking these things up, we've mainly worked with young people, like very young people, 6-year-olds up to 10-year-olds, and now through the high school here at the village. But now we also have a chance to work with the college level. And I just want to give you an idea, read some of the possible ways. Again, think back to if you went to college, think of your own degrees. Here are the majors that are possible. World cultures and consciousness, dharmic leadership in business, alternative technology and sustainable living, inspirational arts, the small community solution, yoga philosophy. Wouldn't you have liked to major in something like that? They didn't have it where I was. So, thank you.